Alright, thanks for joining the video, guys. Today we're going to go over a quick video on some of the more frequently used formulas in Excel, and they're all notated at the top of each column here. And so we have the concatenate formula, SUMIFs, VLOOKUP, SUMIF, COUNTIFs, COUNTIF, and then we will also go over the IF formula. So let's get started here. So the first thing we want to do before we do the SUMIF, what we're going to do is we're going to go into this data tab over here and use the IF formula. So if equals if, open parentheses, and we want if the calls are greater than or equal to the target. We want this to say above. And then if they're less than that, which would just be the value if false, we'll say below. And enter. Then we will drag that all the way down, and notice the if formula is in play here, and it is displaying above if the calls are above the target and below if the calls are below the target. So that will be step one here for us, and that is the if formula. Now we will do the concatenate formula, and we're actually going to do this over here. So we're going to insert a column, and what we want is for John Smith to appear as one name. We don't want it to be separated by first and last. And this will, you'll understand why once we start using the other formulas and the other spreadsheet. So equals concatenate, and we want, it will be B3, which is the first name there, comma C3, which is the last name, and close parentheses. Now, take note of this here. When I click enter, notice how John Smith is together. Well, to make this look nice, let's put a space in between John and Smith. So to do that, after the first comma, we will open quote, space bar, close quote, and then comma. Okay, and then enter. And what that did was it simply just added a space in between the first and last name there. And we will drag that down and notice the formula working there. So that is the concatenate formula. Now let's go back to our report here. So let's go over the SUMIFs formula. What we want to do is we want John Smith's calls to appear here from this tab. Okay? For October 2nd. Okay? So we only want the calls for October 2nd to appear here. Notice on this tab here, there's many dates, but we only want John Smith's calls, this number here, to appear for John Smith, on the 2nd for Jane Doe, etc. So we'll show you how to do that here. Equals SUMIFs, open parentheses, SUMRange. We're going to go to the data tab over here, and the SUMRange would be the calls, okay, comma, criteria range. This will be the name that we want to pull the calls over to on the other report, and that's why we did that formula there. Okay, and then now it's asking for criteria, select comma, and then it's asking for criteria 1. Go back here, the criteria is John Smith, comma, and the So remember, we want it to be for also, we want the date. It has to be for this date. So we're also going to add that in here. So the criteria range 3 would now be the date range, comma, and then the criteria for the date is this right here. Okay? October 2nd. Close parentheses, enter. And boom, notice the calls have come over for John. And okay. Now notice when I did that there, oops, let me undo that. Okay, so notice when I go like this, you see a bunch of zeros. And that's obviously incorrect, right? Because we know Jane Doe has 127 calls on the 2nd. So what went wrong? Well, when you drag down, it's also dragging this down. So notice that the formula up here for F2 is now changing for F3. So it's reading this cell, which there's nothing. October 2nd is not in that cell. So how do we fix that? We want to go up here and we basically freeze F2 by putting a money sign in front of the F, money sign in front of the 2, click enter, and now we can drag this down and we are good to go. Okay? Okay, and then for that is the SUMIF function, that's how that works. Okay? And you can change the date up here, right? So let's say 10/5, enter. Notice the information changes. Okay, we'll go back to 10/2. Alright. And now for target. So we're going to do VLOOKUP for this here. So equals VLOOKUP. Okay. Lookup value. We're looking up the name, John Smith. Okay. The table array, we're going to go back to our data. The table array will be this all the way over to target. Click comma. Column index number. So A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, E is 5, F is 6. So 6 is what we're going to put in here. Comma, we want an exact match, close parentheses, and enter. And notice the targets have come through. And guys, ignore the color coding now, it's conditional formatting. And I do have another video on that if you want to know how to do conditional formatting. Okay, so that is how the VLOOKUP formula works. It looked up John Smith and the target for John Smith in the data tab here, and it inputted that here. Okay, now total calls. We will use the SUMIF formula here. So we just want to sum up all of the calls that John Smith, that the rep took during the time frame that this data was pulled. So equals SUMIF. And the range will be calls, criteria, sorry, go back to the other tab here, John, and notice this will not work here. Okay? So this is not correct. What you want to do is you want to do equals SUMIF. The range is actually, so this can be confusing sometimes. The range is actually not the sum range. It is this range over here, the name range. And then we click comma. Criteria will be go back to this tab, John Smith, and then the sum range is the calls column. And close that and enter. Okay, that's a common mistake. I make it all the time, but just keep in mind that the sum range is what you want to do there. So we can click and drag that down, and notice the total calls have appeared in this column. So it just summed up all of the calls for John Smith, Jane Doe, etc., and placed that in the total calls cell. Okay, so now for COUNTIFs over here, we want to know the number of days less than the target. The rep was less than the target. So equals COUNTIFs, open parentheses, and we will go to the data tab. So COUNTIF, we want to do this right here, this column. So this is where that if function will actually come in handy, and that it already places below and above in there. Click comma. So if the calls are less than the target, so if this equals below, okay, make sure you put quotations in there. And then the second criteria range will be the rep's name. So we will highlight that column over there, and comma, and then the criteria in this case would be, if we go back to the report, select John Smith, close parentheses, and enter. And notice the number of days has appeared. And we'll drag that down, and it worked. So COUNTIFs, that is that function. And lastly here, we'll go over COUNTIF. So just total days worked. We just want to add up basically the number of times the name John Smith appears in this report over here. So equals COUNTIF, open parentheses, the range. So this is a very easy formula. Just select the range, comma, come back to the report, select the name, close parentheses, enter. And boom, there you have it, guys. Hopefully this video was helpful, and have a great day. Thank you.